What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Missflips. In today's episode, we are going to be removing the old finish off of this piece right here, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to use my favorite stripper, which is Smart Strip. I love this stripper not only because it is so easy to use, but it's also eco-friendly. So, I mean, you guys know how much I love my eco-friendly stuff. When it comes to redoing furniture, you usually want to clean before you start sanding or painting or doing any of that. But when it comes to stripper, I find it kind of unnecessary and a little redundant to clean and then strip, so I just apply the stripper right onto the coat, of course removing any dust or anything that could impede the stripper's ability to remove the finish. And I'm just going ahead and applying a really thick coat onto this guy, just making sure that every inch of this piece is nicely coated so that the stripper works evenly. If you notice, I am also using a brush to apply it, but you can use, anything you would like to apply, a sponge brush, a putty knife, or even your hand if you have a glove on it. I do that sometimes as well, because this stuff is so eco-friendly and non-toxic that it doesn't eat through gloves like other chemical strippers do. However, I do recommend taking proper precaution, use your judgment and what you are comfortable with, and read the directions as always. The way Smart Strip works and why I think it is so much better than other chemical strippers is because instead of just burning off the finish and just, basically acting as an acid to remove the finish or the paint, it actually breaks down the compound and makeup structure of the finish or the paint instead of just burning its way through, making it much safer to apply and also remove, but we'll get to that in a second. To make sure that the stripper doesn't dry out before we remove it, I'm making sure to use some old recycled plastic bags and tearing them in half so that they can lay flat on top of the surface, and then I'm just pressing the bag onto the stripper just to push out any air bubbles that might get in there. One thing that's important to note while applying stripper is the temperature, because certain strippers perform better or worse depending on what temperature it is. So for this, for example, Smart Strip performs best when it's above 50 degrees, so I made sure to do this on a day where I knew that it wasn't going to go below that temperature. Another thing that you want to consider when applying stripper is the amount of time that you want to leave it on for. Since this is a pretty thin finish, I thought I was going to be able to get away with going for less time than the container recommended, but that didn't quite work out. So once I lifted up these plastic bags, I noticed that the color of the stripper was still pretty white, and that's usually a sign that you haven't left it on long enough, so I did have to end up going in and doing a second coat on this. But silly me was being impatient, so I scraped it off anyway just to see if I could get away with it, but I definitely couldn't. If you look in other places, the coat is pretty brown, and that's pretty much the color that we're looking for all over the stripper, or at least something close to that. Right here is a good example of why I did a second coat. You can see some of the finish isn't getting lifted when I go over it with the putty knife, and this is what you can avoid by leaving it on for the proper amount of time your first go. So don't try to rush it, don't try to be impatient with it like I was, and just listen to the instructions on the container, obviously, and yeah, just be patient. So after doing the second coat, I removed the bags and saw the color underneath and was much happier with it. This is pretty much what you're looking for. It does look a little dry, but I promise you it comes off like butter. It's so satisfying. When removing stripper, I personally prefer to use a plastic putty knife because when using a metal one, it's really easy to gouge into the wood. And when you're working with nice veneer, especially like this, I'm working with burl wood veneer, which is unbelievably gorgeous and kind of special. It's kind of a rare veneer. I want to do everything I can to preserve it in its original condition and not damage it in any way. This part of the process is why I absolutely love Smart Strip and why I use it over any chemical stripper always. It's water. Cleanup is water. That's all. I just spray it down and then scrub it off. And that's it. Also, I'm using a super eco-friendly sponge right here. Instead of being made out of plastic, it is made out of coconut. That's it. It's beautiful. So if you're interested in getting the sponge that is super eco-friendly and nice to the environment, I will make sure to include that link in the description below for you guys. But yeah, with other strippers, it is very common to have to use another chemical to remove the chemical stripper, and I don't know, that just never made sense to me. So instead of using chemicals and having to use gloves and goggles and masks and safety equipment, I'm literally just using a thin latex glove with water, scrubbing it off, and then I'm using a cloth to wipe up any excess that might still be on the piece. Once the majority of the stripper is completely off, I go in with a wet cloth and just wipe down the entire surface. Once it's all wiped down, I like to go in there with a dry rag and just make sure that all of the excess moisture is just not sitting on top of the veneer, and that way it's easier for the wood to dry. So here is an example of what the finish looked like before. It was a little beat up and worn, but then this is afterwards. This is what you want it to look like after you have stripped, after it's all said and done, and you can finally get on to your sanding. As you can see, all of the finish and artificial coloring is completely gone, and you can see the beautiful wood underneath that you are working with. But anyways, if you guys are interested in seeing the rest of this piece's makeover, make sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay tuned. But all that being said, I hope that you guys found this video useful and go and give Smart Strip a try because it is amazing. But anyways, stay flipping, guys.